It was a cold and rainy day, or maybe it wasn't, I don't know. Anyway, it was some sort of day in Chicago during the Great Depression when one man had an idea that would change the coin-op industry forever. What was that idea? What a stupid question. Pinball. Pinball itself came from a game called Bagatelle. What is Bagatelle, I hear you ask? Well, it's basically what would result if billiards and mini-golf had a baby, and it was all the rave back before any of us were even alive. Here you can see good old Honest Abe playing a game of Bagatelle to win the Civil War, which is how that happened. Bagatelle would also branch off into pachinko, which is not the same thing as pinball, so don't get them confused. I swear to God, the amount of times I've seen someone go, oh yeah, pinball, and then show me something like this. It's like, come on. Oh, no, that one actually is pinball. Wait, where were we? Oh, right. Gottlieb, Chicago, Great Depression. Gottlieb saw an opportunity in the coin-op industry by sort of simplifying Bagatelle and making it more mechanical. And also more luck-based. And thus, Gottlieb created what would be considered the very first pinball machine, Baffle Ball, in November 1931. Wait, that's it? For just 1 entire cent, the impoverished people of Chicago could distract themselves for 5 seconds to forget the fact that their city is run by criminals and that they probably haven't eaten in a week. It's not like anyone had anything better to do, so Gottlieb's Baffle Ball was a big success. It was so darn successful that every stinky businessman in Chicago wanted in. For example, Louis David and Meyer Gensburg formed Genko. I guess they left their brother Sam out, so he made his own Chicago coin. Jennings and company saw an opportunity to make what they presumed were new gambling machines. Even Rockola put aside their jukeboxes just for a little bit to make pinball machines. Between 1931 and 1937, we saw the most models and the most manufacturers in the entire history of pinball. By 1932, there were around 250 models and just about as many manufacturers behind them. I guess the sudden boom of pinball was just too tantalizing for anyone to pass up. Too bad nobody at this time really mattered. But hey, wait your turn. Still, even with all these new guys, no one could hold a candle in quality to Gottlieb, now a company Gottlieb. David Gottlieb, the guy, had 3 major management quotes that pretty much summed up his success.
The 3 management quotes that made Gottlieb a cool guy. There was only one way to do business, the right way. Take good care of the people, and they will take good care of you. There is no substitute for quality.
One defining characteristic of David was how much he cared about his workers. He cared about their lives, their families, their pets, etc. Working at Gottlieb was like one big happy family. Through the abundance of evil, greedy companies, Gottlieb stood out as a small family business that made it big. Anyway, who cares? We're going to California because this was around the time that Harry Williams stumbled upon a group of people crowded around something, cramming their dirty pennies into it. After getting his turn, Harry went, I'll have what she's having, and ended up making his own automatic amusements, which isn't important, but Williams himself would be very, very important. Very, very important with a cherry on top. Another industry pioneer would be Raymond Maloney, who along with 2 friends made Lion Manufacturing back in 1922. They couldn't keep up with demand making Gottlieb's Baffle Ball, so he said, fuck it, I'll do it myself, and released Ballyhoo in January 1932 under the new company name, Bally. All this new competition for the fledgling industry led to a boom in new features. Features like lights. Wait, there's more, hold on. Bally's Airway would feature a score tantalizer. Gotta get a big score. Bally's Jack and Jill would be the very first 2-player pinball, but not in the way you're thinking, silly. Get your mind out of the gutter. Wait a minute. People are nudging the table? To win? That's not right. Tilt. No fun allowed, idiot. Harry Williams might have created his own company, but I guess he really didn't care about it because he mostly licensed his designs out to other companies like Pacific Manufacturing with his contact. This is usually credited as the first pinball machine to use electricity, which isn't true, but people like to say it is anyway. Genko's Crisscross a Light would have the first, very pathetic, backglass. The backglass is such an important part of pinball, using eye-catching art and mechanical animation to attract an audience. Although Genko's backglass is very puny and very weak. They'll get better later, I promise. By the mid-30s, everyone was using these disgusting naked lights on their playfield. That is, until Chicago Coin released Beam Light, which had colored lights and nobody knew where Sam got them. Rotor Tables, a company from New York, wanted to stand out by making a special cocktail pinball table, and nobody bought them. A year later, Bally decided to take the pins out of pinball and invent the bumper. Do I really need to explain what this is? Bumpers are one of the most iconic aspects to pinball. Like, I'm surprised they don't call it bumper ball. The first game to have bumpers was, well, Bumper. Actually, the first bumpers were on Paycent's Bolo, but those are weird and I don't care. Chicago Coin's Ducks would be the first instance of backlash animation. A lot of these old mechanical pinballs had cute things on the backlash, like a moving figure, a ringing bell, or an opening door. They're not that important, it's just a little something to add to the experience. By now it's 1937, and the pinball boom sorta settled down. Most everyone would go back to gambling machines and shit like that, leaving only the big boys like Gottlieb, Bally, Genko, and Chicago Coin to continue making games. With these four in charge, pinball would start to take on a more recognizable shape. Instead of bare boards with pins and holes, tables now had more lights, better art, bumpers, electrics, and theming. I mean, just compare 1931's Baffle Ball with 1939's Commodore. Well, speaking of art, it's probably about time we brought up two of the industry's most prolific artists, Roy Parker and George Melentin. At the time, pinball companies never made tables with a theme in mind, they just made a design and sent it out to get artwork done. The main place to outsource to was advertising posters, and their best artists, Parker and Melentin, would do pretty much all pinball art for the next few decades. Parker and Melentin were good artists, but their specialty was drawing sexy women. They knew that drawing hot girls would be the easiest way to attract customers, so they drew them. A lot of them. It didn't matter the theme, it didn't matter how tasteful it was, women were plastered all over pinball machines. This aspect would sort of be ingrained in pinball's DNA for a long time, even after Parker and Melentin were out of the picture. The United States joined World War II in December 1941, so to help with the war effort, everyone retooled their factories to help produce military equipment. In the meantime, designers Lynn Durrant and Harry Williams would come together to form United Manufacturing. Automatic who? Never heard of them. Their plan was to rework old machines and sell them back to save on parts, but United who? Harry Williams would sell his share to form yet another company, this time for sure, guys, Williams. No fun allowed, said the US government. I need guns. Make my guns. But that's okay, everyone knew it would be business as usual once the war was over. Enter New York Mayor Fiorello LaGuardia.
I hate pinball,
He said.
I hate it so much. Oh, how it makes my blood boil.
But why, I hear you ask? Why did he hate pinball so much? Well, here's a better question. Is pinball gambling? No, I hear you scoff. Sure, there's an element of luck to it, but it's a skill-based game at the end of the day. Besides, it's not like it's hurting anyone. Well, in reality, pinball was hurting something. A little something called the fabric of society. Machines in this era typically offered prizes for getting a high enough score, and sometimes that would be a cash prize. Since these games were extremely luck-based, it was gambling. It was fucking I don't know what to tell you. It was absolutely gambling. So, pinball was banned in New York, and that ban soon spread to many other states. As a publicity stunt, LaGuardia smashed up a ton of pinball machines and slapped his blatant waste of taxpayer money right onto the newspapers.
What you are about to see is uncensored and unedited. This is very graphic, so if you are weak in the stomach, especially as a gamer, look away. Crushed, unplayable, the deed is done.
This would be a huge hit to the pinball industry, and it seemed like pinball was destined to fade away as nothing more than a weird novelty that weird people like. Luckily, after the war ended, there was a huge demand for games, so the Big Four, as well as newcomers Williams and United, got back to work making games for the states that didn't outlaw them yet. The pinball ban definitely took its toll on the companies, so they had to find other ways to deal with it. Williams would famously intersplice their pinball releases with pitch and bat games, and Chicago Coin would make a ton of other mechanical novelties. Pretty neat. Another thing that happened after the war was the use of plastic. It made production faster and cheaper, so it was kind of a no-brainer. This still didn't help pinball's perilous situation though. To save pinball, someone would have to do something game-changing. On a windy fall night at Gottlieb, longtime designer Harry Mabs was working diligently, trying to think of something big. I got it! he said as he looked at his courageous leader. "Flipper, game, eggs. Mabs, my boy, you just saved pinball." Mabs' big idea, the idea that would single-handedly turn a game of luck into a game of skill, the idea that would save pinball and define how it's played today, the single most important innovation in pinball, period, were flippers. Which means, that's right, every single machine up to this point was flipperless. Now you can see why people are angry. It's hard to state how much of a big deal this was, and I'm sure I'll mention the flipper 1,000 times, but the pinball before flippers was a very different game to the ones we see now. Now it's finally time to form pinball into a genuine game of skill, and I'm very excited to see what Mabs came up with. Taking a look at Mabs' design, you know, not quite there yet, but they'll figure it out. It's not like normal flippers exist yet, so no one will ever notice you made the pinball centipede over here. Also, take a look at that date. That's right, 1947. It's already been 5 years since the ban. That's how much it hurt. You had games popping up like crazy in the 30s, but for the most part, the 40s were pretty silent. So, Gottlieb showed off the very first flipper game, Humpty Dumpty, at the Coin Machine Industries Convention. What, never heard of it? People were skeptical at first, but as the crowd around the game got bigger and bigger, the clearer pinball's future became. Apparently Gottlieb wanted to call the game Flipper, in honor of the, but that name was already taken, so they went with a fairy tale theme instead. Humpty Dumpty was wildly successful when it released, so successful that Gottlieb made a whole fairy tale series of flipperful pinball games over the following years. The trend quickly spread to the other guys too, who started coming out with their own popular flipper games. Pretty soon, any pinball machine that didn't have flippers became instantly outdated. More importantly, the addition of the flipper turned pinball from a game of chance, aka sin, to a game of pure skill. Kinda, not really. Pinball was still banned in some places, but thanks to the invention of the flipper, it was extremely popular wherever it was allowed. Places like Europe. But we'll get to them later. For now, pinball was saved, and that's cool. So is Gottlieb's Humpty Dumpty the most important pinball machine of all time? Maybe. Yeah, it is. I'd say so. One day, businessman Sam Stern just walked into Harry Williams' office and said, "Why don't you just sell me your company?" And Harry said okay. So from that day on, Sam Stern became part owner of Williams and designed some games for them too. Oh, and by the way, we're just gonna make games based on places in America for a while. That cool? In January the next year, Genko swung back with their first flipper game, but this one was unlike the rest. Designer Steve Kordick thought something didn't sit right about these new flipper games. Let's put down here. Finally, pinball's iconic flippers were put in their rightful spot. Wait, why are they facing that way? Chicago Coin pulled up and said, Guys, I got this new idea for bumpers. They're called tower bumpers. They're like regular bumpers, but tall." Williams pulled up and said, Guys, I got this new idea for bumpers. They're called jet bumpers. They're like regular bumpers, but they pop the ball around." And everyone laughed at Chicago Coin for their stupid tower bumper idea. None of that mattered though, because the polls showed one thing. Gottlieb was dominating, and their crowning jewel was Humpty Dumpty. To kick off the 50s, Gottlieb released The Four Horsemen, obviously, a game about football. This game would be the first to feature a safety gate that would slide up to prevent the ball from draining too early. Gottlieb was just nice like that. Williams would really get into making these games with mechanical horse racing in the backlash. It was adorable, and Williams loved to make them, and they still don't want to face their flippers the right way. Harry Mabs left Gottlieb, leaving Wayne Nayans as the only designer for the company, and for his next game, he wanted to move the flippers together for better gameplay. But won't that make the game too easy? Nah, I'll just put trap holes in it. So Gottlieb started putting trap holes in their games, and nobody liked it, so naturally everyone followed suit. Apart from good art, a good theme helped a lot to draw attention. Popular themes include cards, pool, bowling, circus, sports, the kind of thing you'd expect for the time. But sometimes, a manufacturer would release a super special theme that makes my number of brain cells plummet like the neuron stock market just crashed. One of my favorite examples of this is Gottlieb's Marble Queen, which is based on f***ing marbles. And look, everyone's naked. Another great one is Coronation, which was made to celebrate the crowning of Queen Elizabeth II. But don't worry, Parker still made sure to make her hella naked. Sorry, can't spare a little decency even for the Queen. Genko had been getting really into making these upright pinball machines. Designer Harvey Heist thought that these would be very popular because they saved a lot more space. He was wrong, but they do look like arcade cabinets way before those, so that's kinda funny. Another thing distinct about these early pinball machines was that your score was presented by lighting up pre-painted numbers on the back glass. With Army Navy, Williams brought out the score reel. Hey guys, I uncluttered the back glass and now you can see your exact score. Do you like it? Can you please die? Nobody liked it, and I don't know why, so Williams went back to the pre-painted method shortly after. Looked like the world just wasn't ready for it yet. There was also a strange obsession with sisters at this time. You had games like Triplets, Quartet, Quintet, 9 sisters? Jesus Christ, that's a lot of sisters. One thing to note about the different companies was their differing design philosophies. Gottlieb, the top dog, always had more symmetrical, more uniform playfields, exactly what you'd expect an old pinball table to look like. Comparing that to second place, Williams' tables were more asymmetrical and had a lot of risky design choices, like having only one flipper, extra flippers in weird spots, extra kicker lanes. You get the idea. Gottlieb didn't push for too much innovation because they knew it worked, and they always sold the best product. Everyone else had to get creative to stand out of Gottlieb's enormous shadow. In October 1954, Gottlieb would release the first actual multiplayer pinball, Super Jumbo, with a Super Jumbo-sized asterisk on that first. Because this game could be up to 4 players, they had to go with the score reel, and because they went with the score reel, nobody liked it. I don't understand what 50s Americans had against the score reel, it just makes no sense. I mean, is this really better? It looks like math. Pinball had averted one disaster thanks to the flipper, but another controversy was about to rear its ugly head. Okay guys, apparently everyone's saying we're gambling again. What happened? I thought the flippers saved us. Well... Bally, what did you do? Well, we've been making, bingo machines. What? Bingo machines were another fad spearheaded by companies like Bally and United who weren't quite ready for that flipper commitment yet. Bingo machines looked like pinball machines, but had no flippers and instead had holes that corresponded to a bingo board on the back glass. And you guessed it, they had cash prizes. This was all it took to refuel the gambling accusations in the pinball world, and it took a whole other court case to decide that they were not the same thing. Gottlieb started a whole campaign to rescue pinball and give them the respect they deserve, as by this point, they were definitely not gambling machines anymore. They advertised that pinball was Yankee engineering and as American as baseball and hot dogs. Only one of those things came from America. Gottlieb's campaign seemed to work out well, and pinball's little bingo drama had been dealt with. They probably had a lot to work with from the last controversy, but you didn't hear it from me. Now that bingo machines were 100% for satanic sinners, Bally had to play catch up with the others to design new pinball machines. United didn't care, they just left pinball altogether. In Sydney, Australia, a man named Alec Hankin created his own company to build and operate coin-op games, but that's not all he wanted to do. Hankin had big plans for his sons Peter and David to take over the business and take it further than it ever went before. But for now, they'll just have to wait on that. Bally's first game back would be 1956's Balls A-Poppin'. This was the first game to feature multi-ball, with a ball-chugging asterisk on that first. This was Bally's first real pinball machine after making bingo machines for so long, so they had to get experimental to catch eyes. Multi-ball here isn't like how you'd think of it today. Simply put, the balls here really are a-poppin'. Ed Krinsky, who up to this point had been working on circuits and wiring for Williams, would leave them to go work for Keeney, who exists, I guess. Krinsky will be important later, I hope. In the meantime, games like Ace High and Royal Flush would establish Gottlieb as the king of card-themed pinball machines, which I'm sure is a very prestigious title. Boy, did they make a lot of them. If Gottlieb was the king of card games, then I guess Williams would have been the king of horse racing, because their next game was Turf Champ. Look at that, they put them down there. Now you don't have to crank your neck up from the action. Genko just released a new game, Flying Aces, and now they're dead, proving once and for all who the superior Gensburg was. In reality, Genko couldn't really compete once the flipper was invented, so whatever. To celebrate, Williams would release Gusher that same year. This would be the first game to have a disappearing bumper. Where did it go? Just like the disappearing bumper, Harry Williams himself disappeared. And by that I mean he retired. He probably decided to do this when Williams was bought out by Consolidated Drug Company, who doesn't sound very fun. Anyway, this left Sam Stern in charge of Williams. Gottlieb would once again bring the score reel back on Miss Annabelle.
"Hiss," said the world. "When will you learn your lesson, old man?"
Well, check this out. There's a high score. Oh, I see. I love the score reel now. Another day, another decade, I guess, because the 50s are over. Even after another decade, Gottlieb still reigns supreme with Williams in a respectable second place and Bally in a distant third. But, you know, it's gonna be the 60s here in a second, so we'll see if anything changed. You know what else is very 60s? Space. Space themes would become very popular in pinball because it's the Cold War and nobody wanted to think about the apocalypse. Space Race was more fun.
I come to make an announcement.
Remember Ed Krinsky? Because he just designed his first game, High Straight for Keeney. Remember them? I don't. That's okay, they're not important. Krinsky is though. He'll design the most pinball machines ever, I hope. After all these years, Gottlieb would release a pinball machine called Flipper. This game let players win free balls, aka extra balls, instead of the standard free games everyone else was doing. Gottlieb figured they could skate around some states' legal issues by making a pinball machine where you don't really win anything. This turned out to work, and tables from now on would be made in two versions, an add-a-ball game and a free game. Ever the trendsetter, Gottlieb's Flipper would also be the first game to be a wedge head, which means it looks like this. Everyone got jealous and copied their new look, which is pretty common for Gottlieb at this point. Needless to say, Flipper was a huge hit for Gottlieb, so they made a whole Flipper series. That's no fair, I want to be really cool and sexy, said Williams. I want everyone to copy me too. So Williams released Magic Clock, which had the first swinging target. Not bad. Not good enough. We need to do something really big. I got it. I'm gonna invent the drop target and now everyone's gonna copy me. How does that make you feel, Gottlieb? First time? Williams' Vagabond would feature the very first drop target. A target that drops. No shit. Drop targets are another quintessential feature in pretty much every pinball machine from now on, and it will probably be that way until the heat death of the universe. So for a while now, pinball's been making a slow but steady evolution. Every now and again, a game would come out with a big new feature, but not a whole lot's been going on. Transition across the map? Rally was a high-tech French company researching and developing the French nuclear bomb program because, you know, it's still the Cold War. They were about to do tests in
Mururoa,
but they were having technical difficulties or something, I don't know. Either way, they were really just sitting around doing nothing and being bored, so they made a pinball company. I mean, f*** it, right? My passion is not for nuclear weaponry. My passion is for pinball. Rally knew they had what it took. Originally being a nuclear company, they knew that their pinball machines would have a technological advantage. They would release their first game, Sunday on Ice, in 1961, along with a few other models. I know I haven't talked much about pinball outside of America, but in short, Gottlieb had a stranglehold on the European market, so Rally's first few models all flopped, even in their home country France. This is probably because of the business prodigy of Gottlieb's son-in-law, Jdswainjr, who made it so over 60% of Gottlieb games were exported overseas. That's more than half. We will never hear about Jdswainjr again. There was also a common agreement among European vendors that any pinball machines made outside of Chicago were dodgy knockoffs, which was kinda true. Anyway, it didn't help Rally's case. It also probably didn't help that Rally already sounded like a shitty knockoff for Bally. But, you know, that could just be me. Anyway, let's get back to Chicago, because Gottlieb just put 4 flippers on a table. Friendship 7. There once was a technician at Williams by the name of Norm Clark, but Clark had bigger dreams. He wanted to be a designer, so he designed Kingpin, and it was a big success despite the artwork being kinda poopy. Clark was a good designer, and he created his own 5 rules of pinball, which are right here, you can read them if you want. Hey, Chicago Coin's back. Where have they been? Well, they haven't made a game since 1956. They've been stinky traders making stupid gun games and bowling games and such. But now they're back with Sun Valley, so everything's cool. Bally, fresh out of Bingo Boulevard, would release Moonshot, which is identical to Gottlieb's Tropic Isle, so that's not cool. This game was designed by Ted Zale, who, despite what this game would lead you to believe, would experiment with many new ideas that would shake up the industry. Just, you know, not with this one. Remember Keeney? 'Cause I don't. Keeney was so forgettable and weak that designer Ed Krinsky would leave them to go work with the big boys at Gottlieb. Long live the king, baby. Gottlieb's Sweethearts would be their last game to feature gobble holes. What's a gobble hole? Well, remember the trap holes from earlier? That's what they ended up turning into. And now they're gone. Gobble holes have always been more favorable to operators for obvious greed-related reasons. Geeky. Gottlieb wanted to make a game based on the World's Fair, but shit, World's Fair is copyrighted, I guess. So they just called it World Fair. Genius. That same month, Williams released Palooka, which was the first time the art was done by Art Stenholm. Gottlieb reigned supreme in the German market, and Bally wanted a piece of that action, so they devised a devious plan to make a game with German on the backglass and the playfield. What fiends. Later, a young Jim Patlaw would get a job at Bally, playtesting new pinball machines, and he also maybe wanted to design his own, I don't know. Ted Zale looked at him and said, "Young man, you got talent. You're gonna make it big one day, and I kinda don't want to be the only designer at Bally, so I'm taking you under my wing." Hey guys, I think this one's a little unfair. Is there any way we can make it better? Oh, thanks Gottlieb. Bally's 6 sticks could handle up to 6 players, way more than any other multiplayer game, but this feature kinda sucked because no one liked waiting for 5 other people to finish their turns. Who would have thought? Gottlieb's Central Park had a monkey ringing a bell. Classic. Nice guy Bally doesn't want your ball to drain immediately, so there you go, zipper flippers to give it the old pincer attack. Back in Nice, Rally still wanted to make an impact, so they went all in and developed some never-before-seen pinball machines with the latest technology, the result of which would be the Fliptronic line of games, starting with Rally Girl in 1966. So, what kind of new futuristic features did Rally make? We're talking unique cabinets with double locks, outlane and plunger on the same level, up-down ball saves, snap-action switches, DC coils on flippers, bumpers, and kickers, high-speed counters with Nixie tube display, printed circuit boards, electronic sound, crazy unique artwork, spinning wheels, etc. Everything Rally did was ahead of their time, maybe a little too ahead of their time. Listen, pinball was a pretty cutthroat business, and if you weren't an American-made company, it was gonna be pretty hard to get operators to trust your product. So, in a real Greek tragedy, Rally would produce their last pinball machine, Flower's Child, in 1969. All their future shit wasn't for naught though, as all of Rally's enhancements would later be picked up by the other guys, which just goes to show you that, even in death, people want to rip you off. Back over to Chicago, Gottlieb would release Super Score in 1967. This was a pinball machine, themed after pinball machines. Oh, meta. And look, it even has one of those old phone things at the bottom. What the hell? That same month, Williams would release Blast Off. This game shot a little ball on the backglass, and everyone liked it. Good job, Williams. Looking at Rally's artwork earlier probably made you realize that pinball art has largely looked the same, probably thanks to it being done by the same 2 to 3 people for the last 30 years. But new artist Jerry Kelly wanted it to be more surreal, more angular, more 70s. After all, the 70s are just around the corner. At the same time as all this pinball nonsense, Beatlemania had been wreaking havoc on the world's youth. Williams, with dollar signs in their eyes, released Beat Time, inarguably based on the Beatles. I guess they couldn't get the rights though, because they called them the Boodles on the backglass. This game would be a pretty fair success, and might have started a trend with licensed themes that'll become a way bigger thing in the years to come. Quick side note, Rally also tried to make a Beatle-esque game a year prior, but in that one they were all cavemen, so... you know, that one's on Rally. Ever since Humpty Dumpty came out, flippers have all been a pathetic 2 inches, but Williams' Hay Burners 2, a sequel to Hay Burners 1, made the flippers a Chad 1 inch longer, much to the chagrin of Gottlieb. But this is standard nowadays, so that's cool. Continuing the trend of questionable themes, Gottlieb released Domino. Can you guess what that one's supposed to be? The Spanish-based Sega SA from Sega shareholders would ironically start importing games under the trade name Sonic, years before the real Sega would make the hedgehog we all know and sometimes love. Gottlieb's Airport would be the first time anyone ever used the Very target, a target that scored higher points the harder you hit it. Later, Gottlieb would replace the standard bells with the chime unit. You can really hear the difference. Why is this important? Bally's King Tut would see the first artwork by Dick White, who stood out in the fact that he didn't want to draw naked women all the time. His style was more cartoony. Speaking of Bally, Ted Zale just retired, so it's up to his protege Jim Patlaw to take over design for Bally. Let's hope he can do it. Also speaking of art, Roy Parker just died, so Gottlieb's gonna need a new guy to be their exclusive art guy. How about this guy? Gordon Morrison. Let's hope he can do it. And just like that, the 60s came to a close. And with another decade comes another survey. Hey, would you look at that, Gottlieb still runs the place. Williams is still making a respectable showing, but no one else could come close, not even our good friend Bally. Sometime in 1970, the Spanish Inder would release what is probably their first pinball, Miss Universo. Inder, or Industria Electromecánica de Recreativos S.A.
Pardon my Spanish.
Would be a 100% Spanish company, and they're new, I guess. There were a lot of Spanish companies cropping up around this time, probably because of the new import restrictions in Spain preventing them from importing pinball from Chicago. A lot of them would just remake what was already being made overseas, but some, like Inder and Playmatic, would make their own kinda bad, not so great games. You know what's cool? Getting points when you lose. Boom, Williams Snow Queen has an end of ball bonus. Now you can feel better for playing poorly. Sega, the real Sega, has been importing various things like jukeboxes from Rockola, gun games from Midway, and yes, pinball machines from Williams. But since most of their imports were secondhand and pretty beaten up, they always needed to get new parts, so they decided they would be the ones to make their own parts, which ultimately led them to making their own shit. A lot of classic Sega pinball machines never saw the light of day outside of Japan, but a lot of them are at the Japan Pinball Museum in Inuyama, so that's good for them. Williams' Klondike in August 1971 featured a slot machine type thing at the top of the playfield, which is weird. I thought pinball was supposed to be not gambling. What the hell? Allied Leisure from Florida would enter the scene with Sea Hunt in 1972 and, well, this is a weird one. They called it Shaker Ball because it had two joysticks used to nudge the playfield around. The playfield itself was hiding down under inside the cabinet and the player saw the game through a mirror. This was some real black magic voodoo kind of shit. Though novel, they would only make one other Shaker Ball game, Spooksville, the next year. The designs on these just weren't good enough, and I mean, pinball fans got mad about score reels, so good luck trying to pass this one off. You know what? I'm tired of being third place. At this point, Bally was still leagues behind Williams, who themselves was still leagues behind Gottlieb, and that wasn't something Bally was too happy about. Enter Fireball. This game was a classic, and a really big deal for the company. It featured a spinning disc that could send the ball any which way, and also the first artwork from Dave Christensen. Mad Dog Dave, as he liked to be called, became very well known for his extremely striking art style, which was like a blend between comic book and science fiction. Fireball wouldn't be the game to make Bally king, but it was definitely a good start. Gottlieb's King Rock featured inlane flippers, which were very popular among sleazy operators because it was very likely that the ball would just roll under and drain, forcing you to put more money in to play more. Gottlieb's Grand Slam in August would be the very first pinball machine based on Danny's Nah I'm F***ing With You, It's Baseball. You know, the 70s have been pretty good for pinball so far. I can't really imagine how anything could possibly... In November 1972, Atari would release the arcade game Pong. Uh-oh. That's foreboding. But for now, everyone was still just fine. Williams just released Travel Time, Not Time Travel, in January the next year. This game would work on a time basis instead, rather than balls played. That meant that the player had essentially unlimited balls, and the only thing that ended the game was a timer in the center. Nobody liked it. This idea would be revisited later on, but it would never take off. Gottlieb's Jack-in-the-Box would have an absolutely massive production run of 8,300, which beat the previous confirmed record held all this time by Humpty Dumpty. You can't escape it. Why did this game do so well? I couldn't tell you. In Bologna, Italy, brothers Marino Franco and Natale Zaccaria made a company to manufacture pinball machines licensed from overseas. But they weren't just happy with importing, it was in their Italian blood to make their own. And by Italian blood, I of course mean the Italian recession making importing way too expensive. So they ended up just making their own. But while their first games were fine, Zaccaria would never really be known for their EMs.
Listen, my boys. Listen to your father's words. You boys are gonna make Hankin a big success, you hear? I leave my company to you. Make this the best pinball/arcade company in all of Australia.
Well, that shouldn't be very hard. Bally would release Amigo in May 1974, and if you ignore the, questionable art, you'll notice that this was the first game designed by Greg Kmiec, who will be very, very, very important to Bally in the coming years. Recreativos Franco from Spain and Nordomatic from Italy would both release their first pinball machines around this time, but neither of them were very good and only lived for about 4 years. Recreativos Franco originally was a gambling company, so they probably thought they could just slap together a pinball machine and call it a day. Wondering what Chicago Coin's been up to? Yeah, me too. They haven't been doing too well this past couple decades, but someone at Chicago Coin must have been a psychic, because they saw that video games were going to be a big problem real soon. So they released Super Flipper, the first ever video pinball game. Not a real pinball game, barely a game, perfect. Remember how I said that licenses were going to be very important? Well, the time is now, and the first company to really capitalize off of this was going to be Bally, with their Wizard, based on Tommy from The Who. Not only did this game have the looks, but it had the gameplay to back it up, ultimately stealing the production record from Gottlieb with a run of 10,005. As far as Gottlieb was concerned though, they were still the kings, and if there was anything Gottlieb knew how to do, it was make a good challenging game. Williams may have invented the drop target, but Gottlieb mastered them, making games entirely based on them. The best example of this would be their El Dorado, which had 15 drop targets and 2 extra flippers to hit them with. The success of El Dorado meant the company could kind of forget about Bally's challenge, and it also meant that they could make like a billion spin-offs, and they were all pretty much the same. But that didn't matter, because soon pinball was going to go through a big change, and on top of that there was going to be a big change to the world outside of pinball that would ultimately affect the industry a lot more than anyone was comfortable with. And outside of that there was going to be a big change in the law that was going to have a big effect on pinball. Either way, there's going to be some changes, and those changes are going to be big.